These top stories in the news. The city gets a court order barring the cops and the firemen from issuing those Fear City pamphlets. Federal court orders Agriculture Department to come up with improved food stamp program. The state Supreme Court upholds the Westchester County rent hikes. This is Lester Smith reporting. Next news as it happens. Next scheduled news at 11 o'clock over WOR, Radio 710, the Talk of New York. And here is Gene Shepard.
In this spittle of who is. No, we have to do this occasionally. We are exercising the spirits here. Yeah. I mean, we tried everything else, you know. We called the union. That didn't work. So, in this spittle of... I'm burning here a very special candle, which I bought down on 14th Street. There's powdered bat wings in it. I have the skull bone of a mouse caught at high moon on Friday the 13th. Look at them beady little eyes looking at me. It's gonna work. It's gonna work. In the regular con, in little out. If we live, if Sala Kashana. I sometimes have occasions, too, to speak in strange and alien tongues, which I do not even understand myself. Yeah, do you ever find yourself waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning hollering out something in an ancient tongue? Somebody comes running. What the heck did you say? You said... Be careful, friends. That's what happens when you wear too many lampshades on your head at too many parties. Keep your knees loose. Speaking of loose knees, would you please play my loose knees incantation? I have to get this said. Yes. This is tonight's salute to dynamic, creative nervousness. You like that, huh? Throw 'em pearls, the swine. That's all they know how to eat. There we go. God. That certainly was good for the sinus, wasn't it, huh? Very good. All right, let's clear the air here with a commercial. What do you say, huh? Yeah, sing it out, gang. It's our national anthem here. Our little tiny nation here. Someday you'll own. I say you'll own. I say sooner or later. Listen to me, Dad. It's inevitable. Sooner or later you'll learn, General. I'd like to say here right now, here, folks, friends and neighbors, for 60 years, General Tire has been one of the nation's leading tire manufacturers. But General Tire means more than just tires. They're a one-stop car care center that's staffed by experts who know how to take care of that old wagon of yours, keep them wheels moving, huh? You need anything like mufflers, shock absorbers, brakes, or little things that go up and down in your car. You get fast, dependable, up-to-date service using only name brand parts. So sooner or later, you'll learn, General. I say, sooner or later, you'll learn. Keep them letters and the cards coming in, folks. Yes, sir, the old clock on the wall says it's time now to remind you that we're brought to you every night at this time by Purine, the Chick Chow. You got a slow-laying hen out there, you feed that slow-laying hen Purine, the Chick Chow special laying hen mash. And that little old hen's going to be laying eggs like machine gun bullets, just do-do-do-do-do like that. Remember, it comes in a big checkerboard bag. You find it at your local feed store. Just walk right in and say, Purine, a Chick Chow, I got a special hen that needs special laying mash. And that man will lay it on you. Hit the button. But they're taking me seriously. What do we got here?
Come together right here.
Riggedy-ding-ding-ding. Let's see. This week, a grand buy is corn-fed USDA choice boneless beef bottom round or shoulder roast, $1.48 a pound. And they're having a big Italiano food festivalo, Progresso Italian tomatoes with basil, 35-ounce can, 79 cents. Yeah, Viva Progresso. Viva l'Italiano. God, I'm singing really great. Can't help it, you know. It's just coming out of me like one vast sea of Rico Caruso sounds. Oh yes, everybody has a vague desire to play Pagliacci. In fact, many of us do. Oh, you didn't understand that, huh? Well, friend, that's why you're playing Pagliacci. Oh, Grand Union. Now, don't worry, I have a story here. I'll tell you. Yes, I have a story. One of my proudest possessions. The story's about a great proud possession I have. And we all have little proud possessions that are secret things that we don't tell other people about. Like, for example, you're looking at the guy right now. You're just looking right at him. Who has a stainless steel and German silver penknife marked, it's in beautiful script, it's marked HMS Queen Elizabeth. Or rather, RMS Queen Elizabeth, not HMS. Now, what's the difference between HMS and RMS? Oh, HMS means what? No, it does not. In our case, it means her. HMS stands for Her Majesty's Ship. Okay. What does RMS stand for? Royal what? Well, you're both wrong. Nothing but foul balls are coming out of the batting cage tonight. I'll tell you, that's what happens when the pitcher is throwing them sliders in batting practice. It's just really not playing the game. Well, one means Navy and the other means a privately owned vessel. You didn't know that. Well, HM refers to the Navy, the Royal Navy. Which high-potency vitamin do physicians recommend? It's Ferragran. Drop down to your local pharmacy or department drugstore section and ask them about this, because they're giving 30 extra tablets. If you buy yourself a bottle of 100 this month, you get a whole 30 extra ones. You can just go on an unbelievable vitamin binge, mix them with vodka and have a hell of a time. Right, there we go. Okay, fine. We're back in business here. And before I go into this thing here, I'd like to remind you that this Friday, this is a little benefit we're doing here for the Denville Public Library, which is the library in Jersey. Incidentally, why they're doing this is every year they have an Author's Day there. And they want me to come and, talk about In God We Trust and all. It's, it's very embarrassing. It's the hardest thing in the world is to talk about something you've written. It's easier to talk about your sex life. In fact, if that's being done constantly. Any hour of the day and night, just turn on to any TV show and you'll find that going on. Friends of the Denville Public Library. It's going to be at the Riverview School in Denville, New Jersey, and that's going to be Friday, 8 p.m., Friday the 13th. That's Friday. And I'll be there at 8. All things considered. That's Denville, New Jersey, and it is open to the public. This is WOR, friends, in New York, the Big Apple, And somebody pointed out the other day that, Mayor Beam has been accused from time to time of not being the youngest mayor we've had. And the writer said, that's what's wrong with that. The funny thing about Mayor Beam, he's sounding more and more like Holden Caulfield every day. Now, Holden Caulfield. Incidentally, the same writer suggested that what Mayor Beam ought to do now is to, he tried everything else. He ought to try reading the comics. That would be not a bad idea, actually. Now, Charlie Brown, Snoopy says, well, all right, I'll leave the poor guy alone. He's got enough problems. He really does. Aren't you glad you're not New York? Or do you feel like you are? Have you been reading the editorial remarks from all the other cities around the country about New York and its famed profligate ways? I mean, we've got the only guys. We've had the only sanitation workers in the country who could very easily, just with their retirement pay alone, half of them could easily buy themselves a large estate in Bermuda. And oh well, that's New York. That's what makes New York so much, such a thing. Speaking of New York and a thing, I'm. A kid wrote me and he says, Shepard, you must have some secret things that. He says, would you please send me one of your favorite things? I want to keep it. I said, what the hell are you talking about, kid? I'm going to send you one of my things. Get out of and it should be the other way. Every night, I'm dripping my blood into this microphone for you. And what are you doing for me, huh? Sitting out there kvetching all the time. Oh, come another commercial. He's got to go. Hey, he's got another commercial. Yeah, that's all you ever do. And here my blood is squeaking out. And it's surprising. It may surprise you to know. I am giving you this blood every night. And I am a turnip. And you know what they say about turnips. You cannot get blood out of a turnip. And here you are. You're doing it. If you could see me, you'd see the green stuff growing out of the top of my head here. I am a turnip. And, you don't squeeze many turnips easy. While we're on the subject of turnips, I am a model airplane builder. I must admit that one of my secret vices, which I had never talked about much on the air, is that every time I pass a hobby shop, and they have in the window there, say, they have a model that somebody's, built in, and it's hanging in the window there. One of the proudest moments of my life was a model of mine one time, which I was about 15 at the time I built. And this is not the kind that you just stick together, with the plastic wings. I'm talking about a model, buddy. I'm talking about the whole works. 1/8 inch balsa wood, the longerons, including very carefully covering this baby with the Japanese rice paper, and oh wow. I built a model and entered it into a contest, and I won the prize. Believe it or not, I won the only first prize I've won in my life, really. And I must have had one of the great first prizes. I couldn't think of a better one to win. And I won the first prize. You know what the first prize was? I won, and this big model shop in town was having this big contest in the middle of summer. You know, it was summer vacation. And I went out, and I was always buying stuff like spinners, and I was constantly buying different size wheels from them, and piano wire, you know, and all that kind of stuff that you can get. And they announced we're going to have this contest. Well, the prize for the contest was a scale model of a very, very esoteric airplane. And it was a beautiful model. Are you curious what the model was? It was a GB Super Sportster. A GB is a racing plane of great renown. And but the idea of the real prize of the model, the real prize of the contest was they would hang the model airplane that won the prize for 1 month in the main window of this downtown department store with your name, your picture, you know, the whole dead thing. Well, I worked for about 6 weeks on this model. I mean, 24 hours a day, night and day. And I worked down in the basement. I had this card table that I had stolen from my mother, and it was downstairs. And the reason I used the card table, did you know, if any of you are model builders, the card table is one of the best tables to use to build model airplanes, because the card table, for one thing, is big, it's very flat, but it has usually a kind of composition top that accepts pins nicely. Don't expect to use the card table. No, the round kind is not so good. No. This was a big square one. This is a strictly poker-playing card table. They don't play card... a good poker player will never play at a round table, by the way. Why not? You just take part in the game one time at a round table and see if you can win. There's somebody who knows about playing poker who's put you at that round table. So, nevertheless, I'm sitting there from early June, see, I'm working on this model. I had bought the kit. And actually, that was the whole idea. You had to buy a kit at the store to build it, see. I bought a kit of a Stinson Reliant, which was a high-winged monoplane single-engine, Stinson Reliant. And all the other kids, of course, were building all kinds of fighter planes. See, and I was the only one that says, the heck with that. I'm going to build a really elegant model of an elegant private aircraft. And so I built a Stinson Reliant, a gull-wing airplane. I worked from roughly middle of June till probably the 1st of August on this thing, hot weather. And one day I'm sitting down in the basement, see, where I was working on this thing. The reason I went in the basement, my mother could not tolerate any building airplanes upstairs because there was millions of pieces of little balsa wood and all kinds of pieces of paper and pins and glue and the whole jazz all over the floor. So I had this all set up in the basement, right next to this cinder block wall in the corner. And I had a lamp that my mother gave me, and I had it all set up there, and I'm working away down there one day, and it was hot. Oh, God, it was hot. Temperature, 100, 120 down there. Humidity, who cares? You know, I'm sitting there in my jockey shorts working away at this model, sweating, and I had it, the plans were all spread out on the table and pinned down. And I was, you know, I had the wings all pinned out, and I was working away carefully one day, and I had been working about 6 hours on this model. You know, kids can really get a fixation. I was working night and day. So I'm working over this model, sweating away. Little did I realize that it was a pioneer in what I was about to experience. A pioneer. Now, I had just bought a brand new jug of almost a pint of this very expensive aircraft dope, which I had brought down into the basement. I had it set up there, and I had thinned it out, and I was very carefully. I was using this to glue this balsa wood. This is acetone dope. You know what that stuff is, a light yellowish. So I'm working away there. It's about 4, maybe 5 o'clock in the afternoon, just before dinner time, see, and I was trying to get something done before we had to go up and have dinner. Working away there. Hot. down in the basement. It's June, and you could hear the cicadas outside screaming and yelling, and the crickets are cheeping away down there in the basement. All of a sudden, all of one instantaneous moment, I am floating around the ceiling. I can't figure out what the hell's happening to me. I'm floating around the ceiling, literally. Everything is sort of billowy, and I'm just sort of floating around. I come drifting down, and I bounce off the chair, and I'm floating up again. I was flying better than my Stinson Reliant would ever fly. I was the first kid in the world to get high on airplane glue. Bombed out of my skull. Holy smokes. I had no idea, you know. I'm drifting around. Somewhere off, the heavenly chorus was singing. You know, I can't stand heavenly choruses, you know. And this heavenly chorus was singing, la-da-da-dee, la-da-da-da-dee. And I was floating around. And I'd land once in a while. Every time I would land, I would glue in another rib in the wing. And then I would float up in the air again. Well, I remember drifting up the stairs. My mother, you know, I could hear her hollering for a long far distance, "Come on up, supper's ready!" And I drifted along over there. Didn't touch the ground at all. And I went drifting right upstairs. It's funny, it's the first experience I ever had of going up 2 flights of stairs, just sort of drifting up like a balloon in a rising updraft. And I just drifted right into the kitchen, see, and I circled the table about 3 times where we had dinner all the time. I drifted around, seeing the old man is sitting there reading about the White Sox. My kid brother is whining, and I drift around. And I come slowly down to a mooring, you know. I'm throwing out the anchor ropes. The Graf Zeppelin was slowly coming in to Lakehurst. The old man looks at me and said, "What the hell's the matter with you?" I said, "I don't know." You could hear the birds singing there. And what he figured, you know, immediately was that I'd gotten into his Pabst Blue Ribbon. Which was absolutely not the truth, you know, no way, see. So, anyway, that summer went by in a haze, because I spent it down in the basement. And I tell you, I couldn't figure it out. Every morning I would wake up with an unbelievable headache. At first, the thought was, you know, that I was growing another head. You know, kids get these strange thoughts. And then I would feel my head, you know, and I had just seen a movie with Betty Davis, where Betty Davis was blind. Did you ever see that movie with Betty Davis being blind? Right. And yeah, Dark Victory, something like that. And I had just seen this movie, see. Schwartz and I made a mistaken moment. We went down to see this, a Dark Victory. We figured it was a war movie. And we wound up with Betty Davis up there yelling, see. And she went blind. Well, now, it was funny. I had a brief idea. Maybe I'm going blind. I'm going crazy, you know, in my head every morning. Little did I realize it was down there in the basement that it was all happening. You know, I was not much of a pharmacologist in those days. So, anyway, I finished the model, and it was just gorgeous, beautiful. I still have a picture of this model, by the way. Gorgeous model. It really was. I mean, I worked 8, 9, 10 weeks on this baby. And I put it in a big cardboard box, all packed in cotton, and I took it down on a bus, you know, to the store, and I gave him the model, because it was entered in. Here he had shelves of these great models, see. And by God, 1 week later, it was announced in the paper that I had won the prize. And for 1 month, my Stinson Reliant hung down there in the window. And my picture, just beautiful. And I just loved it. Do you know I never got that model back? No, I went down to get the model. Everybody has had a great disappointment in his life, something that really tore it, you know, for you. Everybody's got a few of those things in his life. Well, the day I was supposed to go down and get my model, I go down to get the model, and it was in this department store. It was not in the hobby store that were displaying it. They were displaying it in this department store. I go down to get the model, and I go to the manager's office. He says, "Wait a minute, I'll see about that." He says, I don't know where it went. I said, "What do you mean you don't know where it went?" He said, "I don't know, it's gone. It was in a box back here, back of the desk." You know how they teach, you know, 12-year-old kid, they're not going to say anything more about it except, "Come on, kid, don't bother us." That's the last of my model. somebody got a beautiful Stinson Reliant. I got the prize. But I've often, ever since that time, been suspicious of prizes. In fact, I have to quote S.J. Perlman on the subject of prizes. He says, don't give me Oscars when baby needs shoesies. So the prize, I had the prize, but I didn't have my Stinson. And the prize, consisted of a picture of the window where my plane was, and also a $2 kit for a GB Super Sportster. But the kit that I had built was about a $7 kit. Well, so, you win some, you lose some. And I suppose you do things for art, right? Art's sake. So, nevertheless, I personally, right now, have a true collector's item among model makers. Now, I built this myself. I built it, this is not a kit, because there was, as far as I know, no kit was ever made of this plane. I built it from pictures and from a line drawing, actually a cross-section drawing that I once saw in a popular aviation magazine of the aircraft. I'll ask you a question. This is a piece of true dynamic trivia. The aircraft that I built, and I still have the model, and it's in perfect A1 condition, is one of the most mysterious airplanes that ever existed anywhere. Now, I'll give you a clue. Its official designation was HK-1. What aircraft is that? What? Oh, no. Much more mysterious than that. Correct. That's correct. What was it more popularly known as? Okay, that is correct. The Spruce Goose. Now, I want to say something about that. Do you know that I think probably when our century is over, by about the year 2010, they will begin to really write about this strange. He's almost a quintessence of American. I think Howard Hughes is probably one of the most mysterious men that ever lived, and one of the most fascinating characters that ever lived. He's out of fiction. Howard Hughes is. And I have some information for you. I've got something to read to you here. One of my spies keeps me very much abreast of this stuff. And do you want to hear what's happened recently with the Spruce Goose? Well, the Spruce Goose, there was a great furor in aviation circles about, roughly a year ago. They were about to dismantle the Spruce Goose. Well, there was a great underground movement to keep this aircraft, because for one thing, it's truly a unique airplane. There's never been any airplane ever built like this. For starters, it's the largest airplane ever built ever. That includes the 747. Did you know that? It's the largest airplane ever built, and it was built entirely out of wood. Spruce, to be perfectly honest, it was built out of wood. And it was fantastic. It was like, what that airplane really is, in essence, is a gigantic model airplane. It really is. It's built out of wood. And there's this baby, see. For years, this airplane was a mysterious rumor. And I'm going to read to you the latest information on the Spruce Goose, if you're into this kind of stuff. The Spruce Goose is about to leave its hangar after 28 years. The first time. It really did fly. I'm quoting here a very esoteric newsletter for aviation freaks. You probably know that I own an airplane and I'm an aviation cuckoo, right? Listen to this. It really did fly. After 5 years of construction, and after pouring an estimated $20 million of his own money into the project, when government funding ceased, Howard Hughes personally flew his HK-1 Hercules. That was actually the definition. The plane was actually called the Hercules, or the Spruce Goose, a distance of about 1 mile at an altitude of 85 to 100 feet over the water of Los Angeles Harbor on September 2nd, 1947. The flight was totally unexpected. This is what makes Howard Hughes a mysterious character. The flight was totally unexpected and unplanned. I'll ask you another piece of trivia. What movie dealing largely with early aviation. A fantastic movie for the stunt flying that was involved in it. Oh, some great stunt sequences, both formed by Paul Nance and Frank Tallman, was about the life of Howard Hughes. All right. Now that's a piece of trivia. No, it's an old movie. It's a movie that came out some time ago. Anyway, Howard Hughes. A lot of people know the name Howard Hughes. They keep thinking he's this big financier, but he is. But he's he's truly, in a way, he's a combination of Daddy Warbucks, James Bond, Dr. No. He's almost everything, I mean, there's a little touch of Fu Manchu, you name it. There's large elements of Hefner in it. It's just, he's a character that you couldn't have, if you had created a character in fiction, and I say this as a fiction writer, people would say, he's created a fascinating, unbelievable character, like Top Job, or like Odd Job. He's a fascinating character, but you can't believe there's an Odd Job around. But you sure as hell, there is a Howard Hughes. Now you hear, this is the kind of guy he was, and is. Listen to this. The flight was totally unexpected. It occurred on a day when the huge flying boat was conducting taxi tests in the harbor. For those of you who don't know anything about this airplane had 16 engines. That's right. It had 4 great pods on each wing with pusher and puller. Both push-pull engines on both sides of a gigantic airplane. And it was a flying boat. Tremendous boat. It still is, that airplane exists. Anyway, the flight was totally unexpected. It occurred on the day when the huge boat was conducting taxi tests. Now, a taxi test on a great aircraft like that is like taxi tests, really, on the carrier Forrestal. In other words, they're trying to figure out how she floats and how it deals with tides and how it handles in currents and all that kind of stuff. Very involved test. See? So they're out there just slowly taxiing this thing around in these currents and the crosswinds and all. And they were doing it in the harbor, see. Several reporters aboard the aircraft, having witnessed Hughes was testing the controls, see. And he's sitting at the control room. It's not many guys, of this type of a giant, I suppose you might say tycoon, do these things themselves. So Hughes is setting himself down, he sits at the control and he's doing these tests. And the reporters are aboard at sea. And he was testing just the stability. And so the reporters asked to be let off. We've seen it. They were out there for a couple of hours so that they could go and file their stories. Well, a motorboat pulled alongside the plane to pick up the reporters. And the reporters disembarked. And the next few minutes made many of them wish they had stayed on board. As the reporters looked on from a distance, Hughes, just apparently out of sudden whim, applied full throttle on the aircraft, which still today remains the largest ever built in the world. He poured full coal to this baby, and she slowly started to roar along the surface of the bay in Los Angeles, and then broke the surface and took off. And they're amazed, The plane had never been flown. It had never been tested. And here was Howard Hughes, this multi-billionaire, flying it himself. You'd think, they'd go out and get the greatest. By the way, he was a test pilot of his own right. So he took this baby off and he flew it along the surface. It was the only flight for the Spruce Goose. She flew about a mile at about 85 to 100 feet. That's about a 10-story building height. Just flew along, and they were taking some historic photographs that were taken at the time just by people who happened to have cameras around there. And there's a picture of the Spruce Goose hanging right over the water there. See, and that's the only flight that it ever made, the largest airplane in the world. Anyway, she landed, and after the flight, it was built entirely of wood. After the flight, Hughes taxied the craft back to the specially constructed dock, where a hangar was later built to house the plane. The plane has not moved since. It's remained in the hangar under armed guards for reasons known only to Howard Hughes. He's a mysterious man, known only to himself for over a quarter of a century. And right this minute, that plane is in the dark out there. in that hangar, and armed guards are patrolling it. Hughes' reasons for isolating the aircraft, which pioneered many large aircraft design innovations that were responsible for the technology available in today's jumbo planes, remains his own. But recently, various museum interests announced an agreement was made with Hughes' corporation, the Summa Corporation, which called for the Spruce Goose to be put on display in the Smithsonian and other institutions. They're going to take it around. The prospect of carving up the historic plane caused groups all over the country to get up in arms of this. And it's a great historic airplane. On April 10th of this year, they finally approved the bill and the legislation and all the rest of it. And the Spruce Goose will be preserved in its intact state as a historical creation. And it will be on permanent display in Southern California, ultimately, where it was built, in an aero museum. They're going to have this baby sitting there, just sitting there. You know, have you ever looked at great historic aircraft? Because I think 100 years from now, people are going to want to see the things which we took so much for granted in our century. Because by then, obviously, things are rapidly changing, and by the year, let's say 2175, things which we have today will be, are just common to us, will be not only exotic, but truly historical. Do you know that after World War II, how many of you are aware that immediately after World War II, due to all kinds of disarmament treaties, practically the entire Japanese Air Force was destroyed with bulldozers, burning. They burnt them all up, and it was for years before they could even find an intact model of a Zero, of which they had thousands at one time. But many of the great aircraft have almost completely disappeared. People use such terms as the Fokker triplane. Do you know that there is not one authentic Fokker triplane in existence? And there were hundreds of them, in fact thousands made in World War I. Did you know that there's not one authentic one that remains? That's the one that Richtofen flew. So if you ever see one and you think you've seen a real one, you haven't. Those are models that have been built up. In other words, they make a complete mock-up of the same airplane. But the actual authentic Fokker triplane no longer exists. There's not a single one in existence. Very few, it may surprise you, very few fighter planes of World War II, of which there were thousands made right out here on Long Island, exist. I can give you examples of ones that have practically disappeared. For example, one of the biggest production runs of all was the famous Thunderbolt. What model was the Thunderbolt? The P-47. That's the great big Thunderbolt, the biggest single-engine fighter plane ever built. There are only a few models of those remaining in the world today. and the ones that are remaining generally have been maintained by private interests who said, let's keep this historical thing. It was the airplane that was the scourge of the Luftwaffe over World War II's skies in Europe. Very few of them remain. Even the early jets have already disappeared. The F-80 Shooting Star, which was a big airplane in the early days of the Korean War, is practically non-existent. Another aircraft that great historical aircraft was the Black Widow, the P-61 Night Fighter, one of the first lethal radar aircraft, and those are about as rare, believe me, as 17-legged chickens. Very rare. Do you know that some of the great smoke fighters, some of the great firefighters in the far west use World War II fighter planes and bombers for their work? In fact, there was a series the other day on TV, a great series on not a series, a special on fighting fires in the far northwest. And over the hill came this great airplane, and drifting down, and had the big bomb bays open, and they were laying this stuff right down on the fire. And what was it? A flying fort. She did a fantastic chandelle and climb. And these things are almost completely non-existent. You know that right now, one of the most spectacular sights I've ever seen in my life, as a ghostly sight, outside of Washington in a great hangar. Tremendous hangar. It's actually a big barn. At this minute, sitting in abject silence, covered with various types of protective coverings, and you could still see the markings on the side of it. I saw it one night in a curious twilight light under a couple of yellow light bulbs. The Enola Gay. Do you know that airplane? You don't. Oh, talk about a fateful aircraft. It was a B-29 and is a B-29. The Enola Gay is the plane that dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. You mean you didn't know that? The Enola Gay, E-N-O-L-A. I'm amazed you know that. I thought everybody had assumed you know the name. Enola Gay, E-N-O-L-A-G-A-Y was the name of the plane. That the pilots had named, the guy that flew it was a colonel, and he had named it the Enola Gay. And she's still in existence, that airplane? Wow. I talk about the historic planes. One time I was in Indianapolis, and if you go into the airport at Indianapolis, there's a hangar down there that has the name of a great American aviation pioneer, Roscoe Turner. Now the big thing, it says Colonel Roscoe Turner Enterprises. Well, I was able to worm my way inside, and sitting there in absolute pristine, practically every bolt intact, is a great racing plane of Colonel Roscoe Turner's big 57 on the side, painted gold, sponsored by Heinz Pickles. That's why it said 57 on the side. Do you know that one of the great historic airplanes was found in a high school here in the East, being used by a high school aviation class? You know, for years it had been sitting there. They kept taking it apart and put it together, and they discovered a great aviation find, and it's now hanging in the Smithsonian after being completely restored. And I think 100 years from now, the people walking around in that town are going to want to see a Volkswagen. Really, they're going to want to see a Ford Pinto. Really, a mint Pinto. That's fantastic, you know. Can you imagine what a mint? Well, let's just say, for argument's sake, a Pinto will be worth in the year 2175. You better stockpiling, buddy. This is WOR New York. Stay tuned for In Conversation.